So we just wanted to remind everyone of the supports at Cleveland on the second slide there, unless you had anything to add on this slide. Oh, thanks. So Neil and Nick are here, who are two of our wonderful school counselors. And that is the place for students and families to start if they're looking for any type of wellness support. So we have school counselors, we have a school psychologist, I am the school social worker. We have connections with several therapists. We have a school nurse and a health clinic. So if anyone is looking for any type of wellness supports for their family or for their student that goes to Cleveland, please contact the school counselor and they will make sure to get you connected to the supports that are needed. And Neil and Nick, if you have anything else to add that I forgot, please add.
I don't think so. I think I would just say, as you said, a lot of things start with the school counselor and then we kind of parse things out from there. And the school counselor is just a good place to start with a lot of questions around academic support, social emotional stuff that might be happening with your student. And we do a lot of work around college and career planning as well. So we do a lot of different things. We wear a lot of different hats. One of the most important ones is around social emotional support for students and for families as well. So parents, please don't hesitate to contact us. Email works well. Some of us have scheduling capabilities through the website where you can just make an appointment. And pretty much any of the supports on the left-hand side of the screen there, we can direct folks to. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the down low of what counselors can do. I also know that it's sometimes challenging to know, especially if you have ninth graders, who your counselor is. It's not something, unfortunately, that's posted in Student View. It's not easy to find in Canvas. I think it's on a report card. But if you ever don't know, you could email any one of us and we would point you in the right direction.
And I'd follow up with that and just say, there's times where maybe you're not, both you and your student are not sure where to turn. And I highly recommend that you just encourage your student to say, if you're not sure about something, whether it's how to connect with that teacher that you're having a hard time with, or when these larger concerns do come up, starting with us in the building, we can kind of help judge and help kind of give some guidance on, here's some steps you could take. And let's talk about what it would look like if you do any of these things. Because I know some of the fear around reaching out to someone is finding someone new. And hopefully, even though for freshmen, a lot of us are new, by sophomore year and on, we've at least made face contact and being connected with them in a number of different opportunities and times. Hopefully we don't feel like new people to them at that point, whether our relationship is really deep. So continuing to kind of encourage just checking in with us, regardless of how big or small one of the concerns are, because we can, as we said, continue to liaise with many of these other opportunities, and maybe Michelle as well. But I think it's a good opportunity to kind of like get that connection going, even if we're just finding the next person to really hand off that work with.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide probably.
All right, so at this point, the CAVC team, we're gonna start our presentation. So I'm gonna hand it off to my colleague, Uncle E. He's got a few slides to share and we'll just take it from there.
Welcome to Wakanda, Wakanda forever. That's one of the sayings that I use. I use this slide here when people are trying to find out information about whether or not drugs is something that they want to do. I use this slide to show off their curiosity. You can go to the next slide.
What is addiction? It's also called a substance use disorder. Over 20 million people nationwide suffer from addiction. 1 in 7 people will experience addiction at some point in their life. Scientists first began to understand addiction as a brain disorder back in the 1950s. Doctors Olds and Milner in laboratory studies of rats found the parts of the brain affected by addiction. But then in 1994, Doctors Volkoff and Shelbert, top neuroscientists, ran PET scans of the brain that showed the effects of substance use disorders. And like other diseases, these scans showed it affected tissue function. So there are two main parts of the brain affected by drug use: the limbic system and the cortex. The limbic system, located deep within the brain, is responsible for our basic survival instincts. So when you do essential things to stay alive, like eat, drink, find shelter, build relationships, or care for your young, your brain reinforces behaviors that cause the release of...
Was there a problem with the video, Uncle E? I heard you say something.
No, it's great. We can hear it from here.
Okay, I'll keep playing.
Of dopamine from this region. That reward for surviving is also transmitted to the amygdala and hippocampus, which records a memory of that feeling, so we seek it again. This is our survival hardwiring. Addiction also affects this area, up here. That's the prefrontal cortex, which is what separates us from other animals. And this is where decision-making and impulse control live. When drugs or alcohol are used, they activate the very same dopamine process in the survival.
I can't hear it. Wow.
We can hear it, Uncle E.
Okay.
Reward for surviving is also transmitted to the amygdala and hippocampus, which records a memory of that feeling, so we seek it again. This is our survival hardwiring. Addiction also affects this area, up here. That's the prefrontal cortex, which is what separates us from other animals. And this is where decision-making and impulse control live. When drugs or alcohol are used, they activate the very same dopamine process in the survival center. And when use is repeated, that substance can hijack that part of the brain. This hijacker changes the brain and weakens this system to make it believe that the primary need for survival is the drug. In hijacking the brain, it can usurp those primary motivations: food, water, shelter, relationships, and protecting our young. And the hijacker needs more and more of the substance to activate the same level of reward or feeling of pleasure, causing the brain tissue to become increasingly damaged with continued drug use. So why don't all people who use alcohol or drugs become addicted? There are factors that contribute to the development of a substance use disorder. They include individual factors like your genes, your age of exposure, and then environmental factors like drug availability. But there is good news. Addiction is preventable. Key factors that aid in preventing addiction can be categorized into two parts: risk factors and protective factors. Protective factors range from parental involvement, programs that improve self-control, limiting availability, and increasing attachment to your community. Another key element in preventing substance use disorders is to delay when use begins. Put simply, prevention is about delaying the onset of first use. In the adolescent brain, where brain tissue is more vulnerable, the hijacker is more prone to weaken the brain and plant itself as a disease. Those with substance use disorders commonly initiate first use much earlier, between 12 and 18 years old, which increases the likelihood of the hijacker taking hold. But if the hijacker does take hold, addiction is treatable. Advancements have been made in assessments, treatment programs, recovery supports, and medications to treat addiction. Brain scans show that once in recovery, the tissue in the limbic system and cortex can get better. With your help, we can expand these innovations to help millions of individuals and families and ensure that addiction is treated as the medical issue that it is. Together, we can solve this. Join us.
Do you want me to go ahead and play this, Uncle E?
Welcome to Wakanda. This is Uncle E coming to you live from Studio Wakanda. Today's topic is adolescent brain development. We're talking about how the brain develops, and it takes a male roughly around 25 years for the prefrontal cortex to be fully developed, and a female 22 years. You probably heard the story about the conversation that the pickle had with the cucumber. The pickle said, "Hey, Mr. Cucumber, I remember the day when I used to be a cucumber and used to enjoy the things that cucumbers enjoy doing, and it was really fun being a cucumber. But then I was introduced to some chemicals, and before you know it, I was no longer enjoying those cucumber kind of things that we cucumbers do, and it's not been really a fun place. I mean, I've been visited by a bunch of characters that seem to make me much less functional than I normally would be. I mean, I'm starting to steal, lie, cheat, and do all kinds of things. I don't like it. I want to be a cucumber again." And the cucumber says to the pickle, "Well, the bad news is you have made a chemical transformation to your brain, and because of it, you no longer can be a cucumber because there's been a chemical change in your brain that has altered the way cucumbers think, and now you think like a pickle." You kind of sour, ain't you? Uh, but the good news is, because of neuroplasticity, we can rewire the brain. The brain can rewire itself when we create new hobbies and new habits, and put together more protective factors in our story. We can begin to change those things. But if you have become a pickle, then the work is to be able to learn how control those ideas that lead to high risk situations and triggers. So what we want you to be able to understand is that even if you have started the pathway that leads to or can lead to brain chemistry disorder, there's hope. And that hope is, who you gonna call? Uncle E. Who you gonna call? Uncle E. Welcome to Wakanda, Wakanda forever. Welcome to Wakanda. I just want to share that it's an amazing journey, the journey of recovery. If that's a journey that someone has to track, if you don't have to travel down that road, we're here to give you the skills or give you the tools, help you develop the skills, so that you don't have to go down that road, because it's a dangerous road that leads to jails, institutions, and death, and lots of people don't make it back. So we're here to support you in every way we can. Uncle E will always be there for you whenever you need me, because I believe in recovery and I believe in Cleveland. Welcome to Wakanda.
Wakanda forever. Thanks, Uncle E. I think the next slide is mine, and I have a lot of things that I could share, but I'm going to try to be brief so that we'll have lots of time for question and answer. So these are some of the questions that I thought people might have, that I'm going to attempt to answer, as well as my colleague Marisol, I know, is going to answer some more about this. What can parents do about substance use? And by the way, just in case anybody missed the intros, my name's Emma, and I'm also one of the district CADCs, which stands for Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor. Okay, so most commonly used substances among teens: alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco. And this came from the CDC website in case anyone's interested in looking at more information. Some teens are using other substances, but much lower rates, and I'll cover that a little bit later with some Multnomah County statistics. So the first stat I gave was from the CDC, so that's more nationwide, whereas this is from a 2018 Oregon Student Wellness Survey of 6th, 8th, and 11th graders. So you'll see a lot of stats about 8th and 11th graders because they didn't ask everyone. But 31% of 11th graders had at least one drink of alcohol, but that means 69% of 11th graders did not use alcohol. and only 9% of eighth graders had at least one drink of alcohol. So 91%, the vast majority, did not have alcohol. And for this age group, and I think I'll cover this later, actually the main source of alcohol is drinking at home with their parents, with parents' knowledge of it. Frequency of use, binge drinking. For most of those who drank, most of them drank less than 5 times in a month. Only 4% of students drank alcohol more than 5 times over the course of 30 days. And 85 to 95% had not engaged in binge drinking, which is more than 5 drinks within a couple of hours. So one thing that parents often ask is, when should I be concerned? You know, and so just to give you an idea of like what is kind of normative, the majority of kids are not drinking, and those that are, most of them aren't drinking, you know, very often, and definitely not drinking heavily. So this one, I'm really sad. Oh, my little table. I had this beautiful table that's not showing up, that basically shows like the difference between perception and actual use. So there's a huge discrepancy between how many kids are actually using alcohol and how often kids think that people are using alcohol. So most kids think that their peers are using, whereas the reality is that most of them aren't. So that's something to know. Yeah, among 8th graders, 36% received alcohol from home with their parents' permission. So that's the #1 source of alcohol for that age group. You know, and given some of the things that the video talked about, like the importance of just delaying onset of use, that is something to take into consideration, that it's not like really an either or, that's the main source of kids starting that early. Among 11th graders, most of them were getting them from parties or friends. And the 3rd largest source of getting alcohol was at home with their parents' permission. So kids do sneak it or whatever, but it's more often that they're getting it with their parents' permission. And I know that there are parents I hear talking about like, well, I think it's better or safer for them to drink it at home with me than, you know, get it somewhere else, or, you know, for me to not know what's going on. But this is actually one of the main sources of teens drinking earlier. And so not providing them with alcohol may not be an either or. They might just not seek it out. Okay, so this is also Multnomah County marijuana rates of teen use. 27% of 11th graders had used marijuana in the last 30 days. 73% of 11th graders had not used marijuana. And then only 7% of 8th graders. So I share this because I often hear, you know, everyone's doing it kind of like with alcohol, but the reality is most teenagers in Multnomah County are not using marijuana. That is not the reality. And the CDC statistics stated that actually a pretty good percentage, maybe a half to 2/3, I forget which one was which, but for alcohol and marijuana, like of 12th graders got all the way through 12th grade without even trying. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's hopeful, but I also think it's like really, the perception is that more kids are doing it than really are, I think, among kids and among parents often. So this is for tobacco. Only 5.2% of 11th graders had smoked cigarettes once in the last 30 days in the 2018 survey. 2.3% of 8th graders. So 8.4, the 11th graders, they broke into smoke cigarettes and use e-cigarettes, whereas the 8th graders, they just said any form. So it's a lot less 8th graders than 11th graders, but still the vast majority are not doing those or hadn't done them at least in the last 30 days. So if they are doing them, it's not frequent. So this is a table that kind of shows the other drug use. So other drug use, a lot lower rates. You can see at the bottom down here, So illicit drug use that includes marijuana or synthetic marijuana by county, which is Multnomah County, and then by state. So those are the highest, much higher than if you take marijuana or synthetic marijuana out. It's like between 1% to 3% of the population in the last 30 days. So these are some of the drugs that are on this table. You can take a closer look at that if you want to either get the slides or go to the report here for the Oregon Student Wellness Survey. We can certainly provide that. It's very interesting reading. Okay, so here's some risk factors for teen substance use, which the video did show some. And I'm going to say that these are not all the risk factors. I tried to focus on ones for this presentation that were parent specific, and that came from this Oregon Student Wellness Survey. So these are definitely not all of them, but I really am trying to focus on like what can parents do and how are parents, able to intervene. So some risk factors for substance use, not for addiction. There are other risk factors for addiction, but just for use. I'm talking about use. Is when parents themselves are heavy users of alcohol or use drugs, when parents are tolerant of use, when parents involve children in their using, like asking them to light a cigarette or get a beer from the refrigerator, or if substances are easily available. So there are some other factors that, like history of trauma, family history of addiction, presence of mental health conditions that are risk factors for addiction. But the reason we're talking about just like what are factors of use is because the early onset of use is a main risk factor of addiction. So that in and of itself is a risk factor. So protective factors for teen substance use: if their parents disapprove, if the students perceive cigarette, alcohol, or marijuana use as risky, they're less likely to engage in use. Peers disapproving, and youth who disapprove of substance use are also less likely to engage in a variety of other problem behaviors. Another protective factor is legal restrictions. So increasing the age of use, restricting smoking in public, increased taxation, all those things. So these are all from this wellness survey. There's definitely more things, and I certainly encourage people to look into that, or if you have questions, you can reach out to us. But we just wanted you to have some ideas about really what are some of the factors that parents can influence. Okay, so the number one factor in teen substance use is parental influence, right? Parents being involved, parents talking to their kids. You are the most important person in your child's life. It might not seem like it, but they are listening and they are watching. Okay, so from that same Oregon Student Wellness Survey, 80% of 11th graders and 92% of 8th graders reported that their parents felt it would be wrong or very wrong if they smoked marijuana. I do want to just note on this that although those are really high and that's great, 80% of 11th graders, so that means 20% of 11th graders didn't feel that their parents thought it would be wrong. And what is really noticeable in the chart is that that is a much lower number for marijuana specifically. Alcohol, tobacco, other drugs, the rate of parental disapproval is perceived as being in the 90-something percentile, and it's clearly like in the 80s for marijuana. So there's just a lot of minimization of the risk of marijuana use and a lot of over normalization of that. So parents showing and telling their kids that they don't want them using substances makes a big difference. And even if you do use those substances, you can discuss how it's different for kids because of their brain development, and just letting them know that delaying their use reduces the risk of having a substance use disorder, which early onset of use is a major risk factor for later developing a substance use disorder, which is also commonly referred to as addiction. So that's all that I have to share with you. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Marisol. Hopefully all of that made sense, and we'll have some question and answer at the end.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you everybody else for being here. I see that there's some other people that joined. Thank you once again for being here. My name is Marisol Jimenez, and I am new to PPS, but I have been in the field of drug and alcohol substance use disorders for the last 13 years. I was previously with Central City Concern, focusing with a Latino specific program. And so I'm here now, and I'm really grateful to be here and being able to share with you guys. So what can we do as parents? These are just a few tips that we can do as parents, how to prepare having that conversation. Maybe if you haven't had that conversation with your student, with your loved one, be brief. Number one, be specific, have a plan in advance of, hey, I want to have this conversation with you. We know that in these times, right? Like if you find out that you find some weed in your son or your daughter's room, it can throw a bunch of emotions at us, and we can be angry or nervous and not knowing how to have that conversation. So it's very important to prepare, plan, rehearse what you want to say, how you want to talk to them, especially like maybe if you've gone through this situation with one, maybe not the older, but you have a middle child or a younger child, and now you're dealing, with this situation. So being prepared, being brief. Number two, being very specific, not beating around the bush, basically, not being too vague, so that they can understand, and just translating into that concrete behavior, what's going on. Part two of number two is instead of telling your child to be more responsible, be more specific on the behavior that you want to see. So thinking more that positive. On school days, I want you to get up and when your alarm goes off. So just being very specific on the goal that you want. You can go to the next slide. Number three is be positive. One of the main areas that we work with is very positive encouragement. So we know that this situation can be very stressful, and we're scared, we're worried. Just be positive. Think, do, be positive. So where do you see the positive things that your student is doing? What are the, they came home on time, on their curfew one day, or you gave them a later curfew, but be positive and say, oh, I'm so glad that you made it home. So where positive entails describing what you want instead of what you don't want. So shifting from framing and the critical and complaining to supportive and doable, positive reinforcement. So once again, just those positive things. If your student comes home with their report card, or you can see it on Synergy, they have 5 B's and 1 F. Focus on those 5 B's. Like, hey, that's awesome. You were able to have 5 B's. And then like, what happened with the F? Like, how can I be supportive? So being positive in the areas that you can. And that decreases their defensiveness, right? Their rebellion, and promotes more of that motivation. Like sometimes if you're struggling with a youth that is already going through substance use, all they hear is nag, 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 nag. And I've been doing this with teenagers for the last 13 years. And sometimes they say, I'm just so tired, that they just keep saying. They don't even identify, I didn't use today. Like they can't even see that. So identify. If you know, I know parents know, I can tell my kid didn't use today, and say, hey, you look really good today. So point out those positive things. You came home early. Thank you for doing that. That positive communication doesn't mean, right, that you're saying nice things to avoiding conflict. Is just promoting more of that positive talk. If you're in recovery yourself and you go to AA meetings, maybe it would be awesome to also go to some Al-Anon meetings, and just continuing that positive communication. I'm going to be going to right now, whether it's on Zoom. So that positive communication goes hand in hand, and just, it helps to avoid the conflict. Next slide. Number 4, we're really, these tips are from, at the end, we're going to share a resource that we're going to be doing. And these tips come from that evidence-based practices and labeling our feelings, description of your emotional reaction to the problem at hand, right? To help elicit that empathy and that consideration for your child. I think back, like when your child was young, when they were a baby, when they were going through their toddler years, how did we caress them and hug them? So think empathy and like labeling, helping our students labeling those the feelings for best results, stating what you're feeling. I'm feeling calm, or if your feelings are very intense, there's a strategy that you can use. Once again, focusing on that positive. Instead of saying I'm furious and I'm terrified, we can change that talk to I'm feeling frustrated and I'm worried and I care about you and I love you. So once again, those positive feelings and emotions, and showing that empathy towards your son or daughter. Number 5, offering an understanding statement. The more that the other person believes that you get why they're acting that way, the less defensive they will be. This is awesome. I've used this for the last 9 years when I use this curriculum, and this is awesome. Like just offering that you're understanding, and we hear this a lot, and I'm sure you all do. My parents don't understand me. My teacher doesn't understand me. My coach or whoever, they don't understand me. They don't know what it is to be a youth in this era, right? In this time. We hear that over and over. So offering an understanding statement, how is it that you're feeling? And, oh, I understand. Or so trying to see their perspective, putting yourself in your child's shoes with all this technology. Yes, all of us, we didn't grow with all of this technology, right? I remember being in computer class, learning how to type. I had a typewriter when I was in high school still. So just helping your child understand an understanding statement. Next slide. There's 8 tips. So number 6, taking partial responsibility, right? In some of these slides that Emma shared, right? Like if there is alcohol in your home, or if you've been in recovery, you're in recovery. So taking part of that, sharing that problem, it's not the student's problem. It's a family dynamic, right? We treat this holistically. We're all in this together. So sharing even a tiny piece, how can it helps decrease that defensiveness, and it promotes that collaboration with your student, like taking the responsibility. I'm sorry that I had this in the fridge. I forgot to put it away, or I'm sorry that I brought it into the home. So taking part of that responsibility, how and what we're doing that impacts our youth's use. And it shows your child that you're interested in helping solve, and you're not blaming. So part of that number 5, right? Helping them understand. And this one is taking like part of that ownership as well, and accepting partial responsibility. It doesn't mean that you're taking the blame or admitting fault. It just communicates. I can't see the rest of the bottom, but it just communicates like we're in collaborating and doing this together. We're in this together. Number 7 is offering to help, especially phrasing, problem solving. And we teach these in the curriculum. We teach this, like offering to help solve this. What can I do? And I ask the parents, are you willing to hear your student, whether it's you, counselor, or parent that's here? Are you willing to hear them express, I'm feeling triggered. I'm feeling like I'm going to relapse if they're starting in their recovery steps, right? If they're starting sobriety sampling, like they're starting to be sober. Are you willing to hear them out? Are you willing to hear what they're going through? Because then that's where you can offer to help. What can I do to help you? It's not judgmental. We're not here to judge them. How can we understand where they're at? And and especially like, how can we help? Some parents, I know, like I said, I've been in this for a while. Some parents do tell their student, I love you and I don't want you to be doing that, but if you are, I want you to call me if you need a ride. I don't want you driving under the influence, or if you're in a situation, you know, so them being able to also know that you're there to help them out when they need it. So asking having a conversation, what does that look like? And a little goes a long way, right? A long way. So even if they said, you know, I'll text you, or sometimes our students, right, they won't answer the phone, but when they do, or they at least like, let me know that you're doing fine, let me know that you're safe, because as parents we do worry, right, when they don't come home or when they're not answering. So just what are those little things that we can do to offer to help, especially like if they're ready and willing to seek support, to seek counseling, to seek treatment, be there for that. And this is like I said, like a holistic, we're all in this together, the family, who is there, who can be supportive, whether it's school staff, other family members, and or us as well, offering to help. And then number 8 is increasing their pro-social activities. This comes from the craft model, and at the end we're going to talk a little bit about some of those opportunities that you have to be part of that. So increasing pro-social behaviors, really helping the student focus on what is something that they love to do, what is something that they enjoy doing. I have a story from a youth that he was in middle school, 8th grade, many years ago, and he was a great football player. He was a big guy. He was perfect for, I don't know the position, sorry you guys, sorry for all those sports people. You know, he's just perfect guy to be playing football, right? The school loved him, was really supportive, and like the parents were just like, you know what, we're just not going to continue paying for him to be playing sports, because he's just using again. Like he started smoking again and he had been sober. And I was like, you know what, like that pro-social activity, like him going to practices, him, you know, practice every day after school, he comes home hungry and tired and then he falls asleep. So he has all this busy time that he's already focused. If you take that away, he's going to have more time to go hang out with those other friends that are not going to be positive, with those other people that are going to be encouraging, right? And when they're hearing all that negative talk from parents, they're just like, I don't want to be part of that. I want to be part of this other crowd that is going to, you know, accept me for what I'm doing. So we really encourage parents to help your student increase that pro-social behavior. The kid here on the top right, he's a local youth. I Googled it and I looked it up. A local youth from 2 years ago, an artist, 12 years old. He was 12 years old in this photo. And, you know, just like his parents, like just encourage that, you know, and you don't know where this is going to go, but, you know, look at this awesome art. Or I put this skateboard in there because I have many, many, many clients over the years that have said, you know what, I really love skateboarding, but I can't do that when I'm high because I know that I'm going to get hurt. So they love this activity, but they stop doing that because they're using, or because they know that that's going to affect them. So really just helping your students identify. And then at the bottom, this is a virtual event that will be happening for those people, you know, encouraging your student, if they love poetry, if they love to write, or things like that, just encouraging those positive behaviors, so they have that positive thing that they can go back on, whether they're working on their sobriety, or, you know, they're still using, but encouraging these so that this can increase and their substance use decrease. Thank you. And I don't know who's the next slide.
I think this is the last one on you, Marisol, but I'll
Yes.
just talk about that. This
Go
is
ahead.
another big thing that parents can do to prevent youth use. And this is also an initiative that PPS has partnered with through Big Village to reduce youth alcohol use, but just like all alcohol and drug use. And they're really focused on, one of the things they're focused on is just securing items in your home, making sure that alcohol and drugs are not easy to access. That was on one of my slides. I think that was on one of the like risk factors, was that if you found that it was easy to access, that is a risk factor. So make sure that substances in your home like alcohol, marijuana, and prescription drugs are not easy to access. It can be easy to overlook those things. So just something to keep in mind. All right, take it away, Mary.
So my name is Mary, and I'm super lucky to work with this team. And I'm going to go super quick because we're a small group, and I want to give Cleveland families a chance to ask questions. One of the big things that I did the first year I was in this role is we have Portland Public Schools has redone its drug and alcohol policy, and we've really focused on what we do want instead of what we don't want. And so we want healthy, substance-free learning environments. And one of the things that Marisol mentioned really stood out to me. And so when kids get in trouble for low-level drug and alcohol violations now, they used to get excluded from sports for 30 days. And we have reduced that now down to 14 days because we recognize how important it is for kids to stay involved in pro-social activities like sports, drama, choir, any of those types of things. So I just really want to reinforce what Marisol's saying, and we believe it at the school and we believe it for families. We have some exciting resources coming up in the district that we're able to offer district-wide that we couldn't prior to having the CADCs on board. And one thing that is starting next week is we're going to have drop-in hours for families of students pre-K through 12th grade. These drop-in hours are always going to be offered bilingually. Families can come for an hour on Tuesdays and ask any question that they have about helping their kid access services, or if they want to think about how to talk to their third grader so they'll avoid substance use later, or they have a question about how somebody else's use might be impacting their own child, anything. And so we'll be staffing that, and it's just a really open forum. And your team at Cleveland will have the contact information for this, plus it's in these slides. Next slide. Here's that same slide in Spanish so that we can share it with families in English and Spanish. And then Emma and a therapist from the community are starting more of a counseling type group for families, and that will start next Thursday. This is free to PPS families. It's a 6-week course. It's focused a lot on the skills that Marisol just talked about, and it's really going to have a space for families to talk to each other, practice those skills, think about how they apply in their family. Everything you talk about in this space would be confidential. It's 6 weeks long, and then we're hoping to do a second series for 6 weeks. But if you come to 2 and miss a session and come back, it's fine. It's not super rigid. And so we're rolling this out in English, and we're hoping to offer it coming up shortly in Spanish. Very similar model in Spanish. Next slide. Last year at the end of the year, I had some leftover prevention dollars that were supposed to go into school programming, but we didn't have kids in schools. So one of the things I got to do was buy a bunch of these books. And I picked this book. I love it. It's written towards a youth. It's super easy to read. It's got great graphics. And it's told from a lot of different perspectives, from people that have struggled with substances, from, you know, kind of the facts and figures about different substances and what they can do. And then it's kind of written in an interview format. And so now I've got a lot of these books. And if there's someone from Cleveland or a parent here that wants to request them, we'll drop the link in the chat. And you can request a book. They're free, and I will get it sent to your house. And I think the best way to use this book is for a parent and a child to read it together and talk about the different topics that are in it. So those are available to the district. Next slide. The last thing I'm going to touch on, do you want to talk about this, Marisol?
Sure.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
we've called it the referral form self-request for services form, and this is a youth can self-refer, a parent, like if any of you want to refer your youth to receive services and support from our staff, any PPS staff, or I put other, whether sometimes we get people like probation officers or other outside people, right, that may reach out to us for support. And we added the confidentiality piece. Especially if a youth self-refers and they want to seek support, they want some type of counseling, we are going to be open to that. And, you know, just so you all know, right, at the age of 14 and up, we're going to be going by the confidentiality by the state 42 CFR Part 2, which is the drug and alcohol law, that, you know, if a youth ages 14 and up want to receive support, we are going to keep that confidential. And especially if a youth self-refers from school, this is not going to affect like this. They're not going to be getting a level A or anything like that. Like, we're there to support them. And we want students, right, to be self-refer. And that's also a positive thing, right? Parent, if you find out that your youth self-referred, encourage them. Once again, that positive self-talk to them. You know, I'm so happy that you reached out to someone, especially if they share it with you. So I added that piece, and then they'll link it in the chat, the service request form, a self-request form.
And this slide is just a reminder of who our team is. And I think that if you have these slides, if you got them from the chat, I can also drop a link in the chat. There's our phone numbers, and if you click on our names, our email will come up if you need to contact us. And now we are finished with our presentation part. So if people would like to ask some questions, or if some questions have been in the chat, that we are here to answer those questions.
Thanks, Emma. It might be nice, yeah, to stop the presentation. I'm going to stop the recording so